Hi, everyone, and welcome to Be True, my podcast about the writing I love and the writing I do. I promise I won't rhyme the whole time. I'm John Tessitore, and today, Intertestamental, from my brand new chapbook, Apocrypha. You can find all of my work, including Apocrypha, at johntessitore.com. To start us off today, I'm going to read the back cover of Apocrypha since it's the most descriptive and most neutral summary I could come up with in just a few words. Here it is. Most organized religions are textual, handed down in books and scrolls. As religious institutions are formed, religious leaders choose among a vast library of existing texts in order to create official scriptures. The writings they accept are called canon. The writings they reject are called Apocrypha, the books to be kept secret, the poems and songs and stories that are not approved for public reading. John Tessitore's Apocrypha, that's me, is a collection of poems in the scriptural tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition in particular, that question what it means to be spiritual in the 21st century. Some reevaluate ancient teachings, some revise ancient stories, and some tell new stories in a new way. All imagine a living canon that changes with the times and that can be rewritten as we accumulate new knowledge and a better understanding of each other. Not too bad. In personal terms, and to be quite explicit about my sources, this is a book of poems that draw on my education as a Roman Catholic. These days, I am not a good or even a practicing Roman Catholic, but my early life was filled with churchy, popish things. Sacraments, Mass every Sunday, some holy days, the occasional novena, the occasional meatless Friday, nuns and priests passing through my house pretty regularly. My mother was my religious ed teacher. I nearly attended a Catholic high school. In hindsight, there was a lot of Catholicism. So I know some churchy things and some popish things, and more important to this project, I am certain that the readings and songs and prayers of Sunday Mass were my first introduction to literature. Then, later in life, I went on to study the work of Walt Whitman, not a Catholic certainly, but America's most prophetic and most self-consciously biblical major poet. In fact, Leaves of Grass, his single book of poetry, to which he added throughout his life, was intended, from the very beginning, to be an American Bible. So this scriptural stuff is in my bones. And every so often, I find myself writing in a prophetic voice, or writing about saints and prophets. I can't explain that except to say that it's in my bones. One of the things that Whitman reminds us is that Scripture is written down by people and revised. By trying to write an American Bible, he reminds us that someone like him once wrote the Hebrew Bible, for example. Now, that may sound like heresy, but it's not exactly deniable. In fact, and for example, the Bible I use, the version on my desk, is a scholarly text approved by the Vatican. Scholarly because it has footnotes that explain its source material, which Gospels came first, which texts were combined to create which books, the kind of stuff that flesh and blood writers and editors do. In other words, even the Vatican-approved Bible admits that the text was created by people, and that the Catholic canon, the books of the Catholic Bible, were selected by committees as early as the 4th century of our era, and finally approved in the 16th century. So whatever you think of the words, the book itself, as a book, was definitely created and compiled over time. For a writer, this idea, the constructedness of Scripture, opens up a floodgate of possibilities. In last week's episode, I read a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson's 1836 essay Nature, which was an inspiration to writers like Whitman. And here it is again. Our age is retrospective. It builds sepulchres of the fathers. It writes biographies, histories, and criticism. The foregoing generations beheld God and nature face to face. We, through their eyes. Why should not we also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should not we have a poetry and philosophy of insight and not of tradition, and a religion by revelation to us, and not the history of theirs? A religion by revelation to us. Although my chapbook, Apocrypha, mostly draws on the existing stories of the Bible, and especially on the life of Jesus, I see it now in this Emersonian Whitmanian spirit, not in the Roman Catholic spirit. It is my story now, At least it's mine to reinterpret. And it's my voice now, mine for my own prayers and prophecies. A religion by revelation to me. Intertestamental is the first poem in the collection. The title refers to the period in human history lasting about 400 years between the last story in the Old Testament and the first story in the New Testament. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the intertestamental period is a literary dead zone, except, of course, that it wasn't a literary dead zone. Writers continued to write. Their writing just didn't make the cut when the canons were formed. It wasn't a quiet time. It was a historically silenced time. And so it is today. I feel very strongly that we live in a period of transition in which wisdom is silenced, and the big, bold, new ideas for a more just future are completely suppressed. We are, in our own way, intertestamental. These are the dark days before meaning, between the fall and the redeeming story. When myth is molded in idle hands, when the rest toil heedless without imprimatur, and sing and remain as clay. The truth will be simpler later, when holy men choose which words we save and say, when the only way for us to pray will be to ignore this process, this long winnowing of false prophets. We are the mad ones, Apocrypha, and shall be until we are necessary. And thus we will go on writing whatever our wisdom, and look behind the curtain of the past today and peer into shadow. For shadow is the derivation of the light, and shadow is subsequent to the light, and so is chaos, for the light is first. I think it's common to feel today like we are the mad ones. You can define we in 1,000 ways. I don't think it matters how you define we. I think we all feel that way. I think we all look out at this world as we find it right now and think, I must be mad. Why is no one listening? Of course, we know why, and it's not even the stuff of conspiracy theory anymore. It's right in front of our eyes right now, especially today. Powerful, dark forces really are choosing who gets heard and who gets silenced, and they're not even hiding like they used to. Corporate forces and their political cronies, as well as some churches, unfortunately. Raw capitalism, aided and abetted by opportunists. As I've said before on this podcast, I have no ready answers, but I'll be damned, literally, if I sit back while those forces write my life story, my faith, or my future. Recently on this podcast and elsewhere in my life, I've been trying to reclaim some fundamental truths for myself, my history, my philosophy, my spirituality. I guess I've been doing it for longer than I realized. I didn't realize that's what I was doing when I wrote the poems of Apocrypha. I didn't realize I was reclaiming my story against the powerful, dark forces that try to silence me and you. But that's what I was doing. I was reclaiming the spirituality of my youth in preparation for a much darker era. And so it is in the spirit of Whitman and Emerson and the intertestamental writers of the past and the writers of Apocrypha throughout human history that I will keep trying. And so should you. In their spirit, we should all be writing our own scriptures and finding our own original relation to the universe. Otherwise, raw capitalism aided and abetted by opportunists will do it for us. And so, in the hope that we can all find the light in the shadow that surrounds us, this is John Tessitore concluding another installment of Be True. If you've listened this long, thank you. You can find all of my work at johntessitore.com. But first, I leave you with Walt Whitman's vision of a future America from a preface to Leaves of Grass. There will soon be no more priests. Their work is done. They may wait a while, perhaps a generation or two, dropping off by degrees. A superior breed shall take their place. The gangs of cosmos and prophets en masse shall take their place. A new order shall arise, and they shall be the priests of man, and every man shall be his own priest. The churches built under their umbrage shall be the churches of men and women. Through the divinity of themselves shall the cosmos and the new breed of poets be interpreters of men and women and of all events and things. They shall find their inspiration in real objects today, symptoms of the past and future. They shall not deign to defend immortality, or God, or the perfection of things, or liberty, or the exquisite beauty and reality of the soul. They shall arise in America and be responded to from the remainder of the earth. Special thanks to me for today's theme music, which I call D-Chord. Maybe we'll talk again. And if you enjoyed this little podcast, leave some stars or a review and support the work through the Ko-Fi account listed in the episode description, ko-fi.com/John Tessitore, and tell your friends. In the meantime, I gotta feed the dog. All right, Luna, I'm coming.